Utah's future conference will be decided in the next 48 hours. Will the Utah Utes stay put in the Pac-12 or are they headed for the Big 12? Let's talk about it on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcasts. If this is your first time joining our show, make sure you guys like and subscribe. We'd love to interact with you guys in the comments. I will try to get to as many of your comments as you can. As obviously, there's a lot going on right now, so there's been a lot more comments recently to try to get to overall. But love interacting with you guys on the YouTube comments as well as social media. You can follow me at JT Wistcill or at our Twitter handle at Locked On Utes. My name is JT Wistcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about the first day of fall camp. We heard from all the coaches, their reactions to everything that played on the field. But first, we have to start with conference realignment. It's been the hottest topic since Colorado left the Pac-12 for the Big 12, and it hasn't cooled off. And in fact, it's only going to be crazy over these next 48 hours. And I truly mean it when I say we will know where like the next couple of years of Utah football is going to be at in the next 48 hours, depending on how it all plays out for the Pac-12, for Commissioner Klyakov, and of course, how it all affects Utah, because we got word from Stuart Mandel, as well as a ton of college football insiders have been reporting on this. And I've been trying to read up as much of it as I can. Stuart Mandel reported that Pac-12 Commissioner George Klyakov will finally present a TV rights deal to the league members within the next 48 hours. A source tells The Athletic the board and ADs are scheduled to meet tomorrow morning, as first reported by John Canzano, as Stuart Mandel also publicized that itself. And we're going to get to some of John Canzano's reporting as well, because I thought he did a great job laying a bunch of stuff out that is definitely worth talking about. But one of the things that also got a lot of people talking about was Shehan J. Araja, and I apologize if I mispronounced his name. He's a college football reporter as well. Tweeted out the Arizona Board of Regents have scheduled an impromptu meeting for tomorrow, which is expected to be after the Pac-12 proposes their number for a new television contract. One interesting wrinkle, the ABOR oversees both the University of Arizona and Arizona State. There's been a lot of reports like if Arizona left, would they be like, no, we have to take Arizona State with us? Would they be okay leaving out the Sun Devils? A lot of stuff up in the air. No one really knows for sure. Just like in this reporting here, as Raja kind of commented, he said that after the Pac-12 proposes their number for a new television rights deal, that's not necessarily, it's not based on what I've read, because there's, like I said, there was a lot of conflicting reports out there. It is not a guarantee that the number that is going to be for each team revenue share in the Pac-12 media rights deal is going to be given tomorrow morning. That's just where the ADs and the board is meeting. The number could be given then, but once again, the original reporting from Canzano said it's going to be 48 hours. Somewhere in the next 48 hours, we'll get a deal. That could be Tuesday night, could be Tuesday afternoon, could be Wednesday morning, Wednesday night, Wednesday afternoon. Everything is on the table, but it should be sometime in the next 48 hours. And we've said for a long time here on Locked On Utes that once you have the media rights deal in front of you, once you have all your options laid on the table, because it's the last one you were waiting on, right, to see what the Pac-12 is going to offer, then you can make your decision. I still want Utah to stay in the Pac-12. I still think it's what's best for them in terms of their future for college football relevancy, in terms of making college football playoff, continuing in the Pac-12. As I said on yesterday's show, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I definitely understand everyone's arguments for go to the Big 12, and I would still welcome that if it's what Mark Harlan, President Randall decided it was best for the University of Utah. We don't even know if there's an invitation for the Big 12. There could be, there couldn't be. There's been reporting on that all over the place as well, including there's some interesting stuff here. But one thing that is clear is Arizona is the one that this kind of all hinges on. That was reported by John Canzano, who also did say that Arizona President Robert Robbins told the public, as in the statement we heard earlier this week, and also other Pac-12 CEO members, that Arizona will wait and see what the number is before making a decision. And that is, like I said, he's told multiple people now. So that even though Canzano said, like, I'm just not sure that's the case, multiple people have heard that now. So all we have to do is go on that. But Arizona could very well still just have already decided they're going to leave Tuesday regardless. This is just something that we won't know. And at the time I'm recording this podcast late on Monday night, it's just something that it's going to be interesting to monitor tomorrow. Canzano says the conference is full of mixed opinions on what the media rights deal will look like. Some people think it's going to be very comparable to what the Big 12 did. Some people think it's going to be a lot lower. The opinions are all over the place. Sounds like everything related to conference media rights negotiations, right? People, opinions, or just their feelings on conference realignment is all over the place. But it does sound like the media rights deal will be done with, if they do, when they do get it done, and just not done, I should say, but just have a plan to finalize and present it in front of the other Pac-12 schools, presidents, athletic directors, all of that. And it does sound like this media rights deal would include a plan for potential expansion as well, with San Diego State and SMU still in play. And there was even a rumor that, or not rumor, but Canzano said there's a possibility the Pac-12 might be willing to pay some of San Diego State's exit fee in order to get the Aztecs into the Pac-12. Because one thing that seems the Pac-12 just needs to do in order to survive is expand. It doesn't seem feasible, especially if you lose Arizona to stay at 8 teams. Even staying at 9 doesn't seem likely. You're going to have to get back up to at least 10, if not 12 teams. And 10 seems like the most likely option right now. But it also sounds like this is going to be a short-term deal, as Washington and Oregon will want out. It sounds like they want to get into the Big Ten as soon as they can. They aren't able to do that right now, but it's going to happen sometime in the next few years. It definitely sounds like. And Oregon and Washington, they're both still in the Pac-12 right now rather than the Big 12, because they still value that access to the college football playoff above all else, according to Canzano, as of right now. Like I said, there's a lot difference between what I expect the media rights deal to come at is somewhere between 25 and 30 million. To me, there's a lot difference in the 6 million there, like in terms of them valuing playoff experience for that 5 to 6 million kind of range. Because when you make the college football playoff too, that's kind of like a 5 million to 10 million extra you get in a single season as well. Now, banking on that is not a wise decision, because we know how long it's been since the Pac-12 team has been in the college football playoff. But especially with USC and UCLA leaving, Washington and Oregon might see an opportunity to build on their brand success in the short term overall. But once again, just talking about valuing that access, it makes sense because they have a clear path in the Pac-12. And it's a lot different when you talk about a $5 to $6 million difference that you could make up hypothetically by making the college football playoff. And then what the Big Ten teams, which I believe last I read was $70 million per team, something around that. So literally doubling the amount. So yeah, there's a pretty big difference here. But as I mentioned, this is all wild stuff. And this is what's going to be interesting. What is the media rights deal going to be? Is this going to be a situation for Utah where they're going to look at it? What is the number that President Randall and Mark Harlan like? I think early on in my show, a couple months ago, I said a number originally. I'd be like, yeah, as long as it's like 10 million within. I've kind of backtracked all that the more I've kind of read up on things and just seen how this whole situation playing out. I feel like if it's below 25, if you're talking 6 million below, if it's below 25, that Utah should go to the Big 12 if the invitation is there. If the invitation, once again, as long as if it's just a little less than the Big 12, I think that's okay, because I still think there's an opportunity for each individual school to be able to cash in on some extra money, because once again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Utah's been very successful in the Pac-12. I just think that's a hard transition to make, jumping conferences, new opponents, all the things that could come in there. I could be proven wrong, but once again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's where I think for Utah, even if you have to take a couple million less. And this is one thing, again, like, we're just us as Utah fans. We're obviously not going to see a single penny of the media rights deal money, right? So that's where, for me, I just want what's best for Utah football. And I truly still believe that is for them to stay in the Pac-12. I just don't see them falling behind in the future of college football. I still believe they're building the right steps and taking the right path to be, no matter if they go to the Pac-12 or the Big 12. I just think when we do eventually get to super conferences, with Kyle Whittingham agreed with me today. He said that he thought we're headed for super conferences as well one day. I just still think that the Utah Utes are going to be included in that based on their success that they've had on the football field. But it's interesting to see so many. I mean, Pete Thamel of ESPN, Stuart Mandel of The Athletic, as we already mentioned, John Canzano, just like so many big name reporters kind of diving into all of this and giving us the details on everything that's going down. And it's going to be just a crazy week. And as I said, in sometime in the next 48 hours, we should know if Utah's going to stay committed to the Pac-12 for the next couple of years, or if they're going to be trying to head to the Big 12. It's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out. But want to talk a step away from the media rights talk and get to the actual field, because Utah was back in fall camp, and we got to talk about all the comments that we got from the media being able to talk to the coaches. We are going to be discussing that in one moment. But first, I want to talk to you guys about our friends at eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors with eBay Guaranteed Fit. You can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to the My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. All righty, coming back into this one. Let's move off of media rights talk, which there's, like I said, we could do so much more on that. And I'm fascinated to see how it plays out because this feels like it's coming to a head. We're hearing tons of reports that Arizona, to the Big 12 is done. We already talked about that border regions meeting and being in place. The Pac-12 is going to present the media rights deal. I think it was Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports was talking about, like, I don't see the obvious TV options even. He just mentioned how ESPN's been cutting back on costs. I'm the ESPN talent layoffs. I saw that Mark Jackson was even laid off, so those aren't even done, as we saw today. Those aren't as much of a concern for me for like Utah's Pac-12 media rights deal, like ESPN not being involved because they're cutting talent, because just the general audience doesn't show up to a game because of who's calling the game. Look, I'm going to miss Jeff Van Gundy's quips and everything, but at the end of the day, that people will not be not tuning in next year because Jeff Van Gundy's not in the call. And not just because obviously Doris Burke and I do think Doc Rivers will both do an exceptional job with the opportunity they get, but just in general, I just think obviously the majority of the audience comes for the product itself. That's what ESPN wants to spend the most money on. There's a lot of value in the late night Pac-12 slate. I still believe ESPN is going to be involved in that. And that's what's going to be interesting to see is what this media rights deal looks like. And we'll see as well what Utah decides to do. I still think they're going to end up staying in the Pac-12. I still think even if Arizona leaves, I just think they'll work it together with some of these other teams and still get a comparable media rights deal to what the Big 12 did. I'd be shocked if it was more. And I think the reports and statements of like, oh, we'll beat the Big 12 numbers, that's really cooled off a lot. So once again, I expect the Utah to stay in the Pac-12, finalize the media rights deal with the other Pac-12 members, but we're going to continue to react to all the comments and everything, because after the board meeting tomorrow between the ADs, we could hear what the media rights deal number is. It's just going to be interesting to see what happens next going forward, because the Pac-12 needs to get this done. They obviously moved quickly after what happened with Colorado, trying not to lose any other schools. And who knows, they could have already lost Arizona even by the time you're listening to this episode. So a lot of fascinating stuff. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And I'm just curious to see how it'll all affect Utah. And I think it'll lead Utah staying in the Pac-12, but only one way to find out. And that's to keep track of everything. And you'll be sure to keep it here at Locked On Utes tomorrow, as we'll be reacting to all the latest conference realignment news. And of course, we'll also be talking about what we hear out of fall camp, which is exactly what we're going to do for the rest of this episode. As we got to hear from Coach Witt after practice today, and he said that, Brandon Rose entered fall camp as the leader, slightly ahead at QB2. This comes from our friend at KSL.com, Josh Furlong, who said he's QB2 right now, but QB1 if Cam's not healthy, but did mention that Nate Johnson and Bryson Barnes would continue to jockey through position. And this is what we thought was going to happen, right? Brandon Rose was the best guy in the spring. Even look, Nate Johnson dealt with some injuries there, but so I'll be excited for him to get more opportunities as well. But it seems like if Cam Rising's not ready to go, I expect it to be Brandon Rose. I think Bryson Barnes still has a shot. And one thing that was clear, though, Andy Ludwig did mention is just, he said that he was pretty adamant. This comes from Josh Newman, also a contributor at KSL.com now, Ludwig said he was pretty adamant that he needs to get Nate Johnson on the field in some fashion. No, Johnson is not changing positions as well, that Newman added there at the end. But once again, just we saw Nate Johnson. What was it? I mean, he had one touchdown pass, 3 rushing touchdowns. His 5 or 6 carries he had were exceptional. Even in the Pac-12 championship game, I remember him catching a pass as well. Like, he's just a playmaker. Every time he's on the field, it makes things happen. I want to see more Nate Johnson. Cam Rising will be this team's starting quarterback when he's fully healthy, but I think the Nate Johnson package has to continue to pop up because he's just electric with the ball in his hands, and I want to continue to see him get more opportunities and carries. But I would be surprised, like I said, if he ends up being the starter for game 1, just because it does seem like who has the inside track to that right now is Brandon Rose, because of how strong he was in the spring. And it sounds like he's the one taking the majority of those reps. But Kyle Whittingham said, when asked, like, what are the biggest concerns with this team outside of quarterback? He said quarterback is 1, 2, and 3. So that is obviously the biggest thing right now. Just based on those comments, I don't think Coach Witt feels great about going into the first game with a Brandon Rose who has never started a college football game, right? And obviously, if Brandon Rose looks even better than Bryson Barnes, he doesn't feel great about Bryson Barnes and just wants to see more Nate Johnson because he hasn't been healthy. So I'm very interested to monitor this quarterback situation. And I think it'll be just fascinating to watch and see how it ends up shaking out, because there is a lot of interesting details here. Because look, quarterback is the most important position for a team, and Utah could be without it against an SEC team. I still think the strength of Utah's roster and how good they are in Salt Lake will allow them to beat said SEC team, being the Florida Gators, if Cam Rising is not good to go. But still going to be interesting to see how it all ends up playing out overall. And as I said, that was kind of the biggest issue, was quarterback depth overall. Kyle Whittingham also talked about Cam Rising, saying he will be limited in fall camp for a couple weeks, and that he hopes it is to lift some of those limitations as the camp goes on. They would like to lift the limitations. He said they just need to be smart about how they go about it and not rush his return overall. One thing that was interesting too with Kyle Whittingham, just about Cam Rising, or not Kyle Whittingham about Cam Rising, but just we saw in the video that Utah football published about the very first practice, there was a shot of Cam. I believe it was Cam. It was in his helmet and shoulder pads. Cam was throwing. He was out there, obviously not getting hit. None of the quarterbacks are getting hit right now, but just a nice step that he was ready to go for at least the first day. And we did hear pretty much everyone was almost full go, lost in kind of the shuffle and everything. As Brant Keithy has made a lot of progress, but he is not full go yet. But it does sound like he's going to be full go very shortly in the near future. So that's something that that is really exciting as well. And also what was really exciting was we got our first look at some of the newcomers for Utah football today, or obviously we didn't because we don't get to see practice, but the coaching staff did. And Kyle Whittingham, when asked about his first impressions of the newcomers, said they were very good. He said Micah Pittman looked really good today. He has a good skill set, soft hands when catching punts, and excellent hands out of the slot on offense. I do expect Pittman to be this team's punt returner this year. Just think he is a little more explosive than Devon Bailey, which will give him the edge there. Also said that Emery Simmons had a good day, and they also mentioned that their new tight end, as I'm just reading this right now, it's the guy who came over from Snow College. I think it's Dallin something, but I apologize for blanking on his name at the moment. And defensively, he just said it was the same career as we had in the spring. So yeah, we were pleased so far, and I think that means we saw Logan Fano was answering questions in the fun question that Utah football posted about them giving a TED talk for over an hour, which I thought that those questions are always great, by the way. I'd be curious to hear from you guys too, like just what would be your thing you could give a TED talk on for over an hour. As you guys who are watching this probably know and listening to this, since I talk about Utah football for 30 minutes, 5 times a week, I feel fairly confident I could talk about Utah football for an hour, just since I'm used to doing that for a week overall. But I would love to hear from you guys what you think your things would be overall. But keeping with the quotes and everything that we learned today as well, it was like I said, just exciting to see and hear from Kyle Whittingham on this team. He also was asked about what he's most confident in right now, and he said the defense overall. He said at every level we are talented. The front is physical and athletic. The linebackers are active and tough, and the secondary is a bunch of ball hawks back there with some really good tacklers at safety. So I think the defense really has a chance to be a standout for us this year. And he's absolutely right. I mean, you return key contributors. Everyone's back in the front seven pretty much. And I guess Mahmoud Diabate is gone. And of course, Gabe Reed is gone. But I do think Leavani Damuni will be better this year. Just a more natural inside linebacker with already a lot of success in the Pac-12 for sure. And then you look at a guy in Gabe Reed. He was a great veteran presence, but now you have Jonah Ellis, Van Fillinger, who also I think are in for stronger years this year. Jonah will just have like a kind of what we saw from at the end of the year from the start, but Chase Kennedy, Logan Fano, how he's going to look, and the interior defensive tackles is, in my opinion, by far the best that the Pac-12 has to offer. We talk about Junior Tafuna, Samote Pepa, and Aliki Vaimahi. And then the secondary as well. He was even, I believe, Coach Witt, or actually, was it Coach Scally? Coach Scally was actually asked on replacing Clark Phillips III. And I thought Coach Scally made a great point, just saying, hey, same way we've always replaced our other great DBs that we've had. You recruit, you develop, and you manage. That's our job. Recruiting, the number one thing we want to do, identify those that fit our culture, those that physically can do it, and get them ready mentally. Now, obviously, they tried to do that through the transfer portal a little bit by bringing in a Miles Battle, but I think he's also talked about the Smith Snowdens and the CJ Blockers that they're going to have an opportunity to earn some playing time right away this fall. And I'm excited to see if those guys are going to be able to do it, because JT Broughton, Zamiah Vaughn, they're obviously going to be the starters. I expect Miles Battle to be the third guy, but injuries always seem to pop up. I think JT Broughton missed a game or two last year, or someone did for the Utah in the quarter department. So you needed guys like Matalele to step up, who's now transferred over to Utah State. So who is going to be the guy that steps up for this Utah football team? That's something I'm very curious to monitor and see how it plays out overall. And just speaking about the coaches as well, because all the assistant coaches spoke today, and that's something we'll dive into more on a future episode of Locked On Utes too. But one thing that Morgan Scally did reiterate, that per courtesy of Josh Newman of the Salt Lake Tribune, he said that Nate Ritchie's ready to go, no issues. For those of you who remember watching him play back in 2020, I think that's something that we should all be really excited about, is getting a Nate Ritchie back fully healthy. I still think for 2023, the best safeties in this Utah team will be Cole Bishop at strong safety and Sione Vaki at free safety. But I do think there's at times where, especially if it's like a short yard situation, maybe, but just using some 3 safety looks, because we know about the ability that Vaki has to come down and cover guys in the slot. I think you can use that, play Bishop more in the box, and then Ritchie's another versatile chess piece for Morgan Scally to use in this defense overall. So I thought that was really exciting to hear about as well. We also got a little bit of an update on the battle of the offensive line overall. Said they have they're still battling for the starting spots, but like they have a 5 if they needed to right now. We heard Kump Maia and Faia, I apologize if I mispronounced his name at the end there, all in the mix at center. And Kump's versatility is also a huge thing that also comes with us from Josh Newman, who asked Jim Harding about that earlier today. And also another injury note, courtesy of Josh Newman, Chris Curry was cleared. That's a big thing that we wanted to hear overall. It was great to hear that those guys are ready to go. And this Utah backfield, and excuse me one second as there we go. I was trying to remember who they just everyone talked today, so it's hard to try to keep track of who said what overall. I'm trying not to misquote people and coaches especially. Jaquindon Jackson was mentioned by Andy Ludwig. He just on the running back room or all overall, because like I said, it's great to hear that Chris Curry is going to be good to go. And on the running backs, he said, I feel really good. This is Andy Ludwig talking. Obviously, with the growth and development of Jaquindon Jackson after we made that switch to running back, you're seeing the skill set just scratching the surface. He's highly motivated and showing great improvement in the spring, or he was, highly motivated and showed great improvement in spring. And I really like his growth and development in that position. Also mentioned Mekhi Bernard and what a versatile piece for them he is, and just really good with what he brings to the table. Especially, he didn't mention this, but I'm sure actually he does mention it a little later on, just catches the heck out of the ball in the backfield and is our best pass protector, which is a very important and underrated skill for running back. And then Jalen Glover's continued to show great growth thrown to the fire as a true freshman in the Pac-12. No joke, handled that excellent in spring as well. And got a couple of young guys that are coming up too, anxious to get going overall there too. And one thing too that Andy Ludwig also brought up was just addressing the strengths of the offense. And he thought that just brought up the offensive line and the depth that they have. But I thought it was great that he mentioned that Spencer Fano and Caleb Lomu are really good looking athletes. And he thinks that they would be the guys who could be the strength of the unit just very soon. And it sounds like this team is very excited about this, the state of the offensive line overall, which I think is really exciting overall. So I thought that was another huge plus. Also, we heard from Morgan Scalley, who said that was asked what challenges do you see ahead for this defense, and he says the offenses we're going to play, of course. And this is not Morgan Scalley talking. This is me talking. Shedeur Sanders, Caleb Williams. Like I said, that's Shedeur Sanders, the first name that jumped in my mind. Obviously, Caleb Williams is the quarterback threat in this conference. Michael Penix, Bo Nix, Jaden DeLaura, DJU. Even Dante Moore at UCLA, if he ends up being the starter there, like it's just a gauntlet of quarterbacks. Not even mentioning going down to Baylor. I don't know who Baylor's starting quarterback is going to be off the top of my head, but the Bears can usually put up points. Not as known for their offense as they are for their defense, but still going to be a tough game. So it's and continuing with that quote about what's the biggest challenge, he said we need to play. We've got our hands full. We need to play well defensively. We got very good quarterbacks in this league, very good coaching in this league. The great thing is we've got good players too. We've got good players. We got good coaches. There's a lot that goes into having a season and remaining healthy is a big part of that. You got to be smart in how we prepare at the same time. We need to hit and we need to find out who's who overall. And that's what's nice about the first day of fall camp. You have a lot of time to short that out too. And Kyle Whittingham, speaking of one of the guys that we're just excited to see more of, Kyle Whittingham was asked about Lander Barton and said Lander is going to be even more impactful than he was last year. He's 15 to 20 pounds heavier than he was and hasn't lost a step. He is big, physical, and tough. We expect that he's going to be a very good player for us again, and even better than last year. If you're a fan of this, if you do watch the show every day, you know what a fan I am of Lander Barton. I think by the end of the season, he's going to be the best player on this Utah defense. Those of you who did listen every day, if you had a nickel every time I said that, would be pretty rich at this point now. I just think when you look at his strength, his speed, his explosiveness, he strikes me as a guy who's only going to be at Utah for 3 years. So last year and the next two. And then I think he's NFL bound. I think he's that special of a player. It's so hard to start at a position as physical as inside linebacker as a true freshman. And that's what Lander Barton was able to do. And look, went through a little bit of rough patches as a true freshman, but I thought learned a lot in that first year. And I think is set for a great sophomore season. And I think he's really going to stand out. And one guy who wasn't mentioned specifically today, but I'm just excited to get a little bit more of see Justin Medlock as well. He's another guy that I think has a chance to do some special things overall. So it's going to be interesting to see what he is able to do overall. And just it's just great that we have fall camp back, right? To be able to talk about quotes, what the coaches are saying, who stood out, who didn't. Something I was really excited. I did my biggest questions yesterday We pretty much had all of them mentioned. I believe it was Bill Riley did try to ask him. I think still my biggest question is about the left tackle spot and how Falcon Kaumatule is over there. And Coach Witt just said, look, he's in the mix. They're keeping it very open-ended about who their starting offensive line is going to be, which fits with what exactly we expect from Coach Whittingham and this Utah staff in general. That's how they're going to operate and play things out. And I'll be reacting to comments made by Jim Harding and the rest of the assistant coaches throughout the week, because it was great that before practice today, everyone got to hear from all of the everyone got to hear from all the assistant coaches, and then you get the head coaches overall. So this is exciting. I thought it was great to hear from Coach Witt. Once again, just great to hear that how everyone's kind of doing, the progress that they're making overall. And it's exciting that we got Utah football here, that you're hearing all these positions getting talked about, hearing how confident they are in the defense, hearing from the coordinators, everyone. This is what it's all about. Utah football, fall camp's back. The season is less than a month away, and it's going to be interesting to see. The biggest question will continue to be, is Cam Rising ready, right? Got some work today, throwing a little bit. As I mentioned, we saw him with the helmet and pads on, taking some snaps, but is he going to be ready for the full contact that comes with playing a team like the Florida Gators? Are they going to want to throw him out there knowing that Florida has a 400-pound defensive lineman? Do they want him landing on that knee? If he's not 100% healthy, or he's probably not going to be for the very first game, but if he's not 90+% healthy, I find that hard to believe. And once again, the biggest other question Coach Witt had was, how's the quarterback room? What is the quarterback looking right? It's the first, second, and third biggest questions. The first, if you were to ask Coach Witt, I'm sure, like, not ask because he wouldn't answer, but like the first is like, is Cam Rising healthy? Then how good is Brandon Rose? Then the next one's how good Bryson Barnes. Then third is like, how do we incorporate Nate Johnson as well? Just a lot of stuff that Utah has to figure out, and it's going to be fun to react and just monitor it all here, all fall camp long on Locked On Utes, your home for Utah football content every single day. So can't thank you guys enough for joining. Would love to hear from you guys in the comments. What do you think is going to happen with this Pac-12 media rights deal? Do you think that Utah is going to stay put in the Pac-12? Do you think they're bound for the Big 12? What are you hoping to learn in fall camp? What did you guys find the most interesting here from Coach Witt? And hey, we just want to be excited that Isaiah Garcia, a 4-star, committed to Utah, which I genuinely am still very hyped about. Just haven't had the chance to talk about it because of how insane the content or just the news that has been dropping this week has been. Just leave that down in the comments as well. But appreciate you guys as always for listening to our show. We will be back tomorrow with more fall camp stuff, and especially reacting to all the latest news and rumors that come out of these Pac-12 meetings that we're going to have. And we'll especially be talking about, if we do get a chance to look at the Pac-12 media rights deal numbers, we'll be reacting to those tomorrow, what they mean for Utah on tomorrow's Locked On Utes. We look forward to seeing you then. Have a great Tuesday.